Hello.
Hello, Mr. Rich. It's Gillian Ormston here.
Hello, Gillian. How are you? You can call me Ben. It's okay.
All right. Well, I always like to be professional first and foremost, and then if you offer me that privilege, then that's great.
Well, okay. Well, we'll assess your professionalism as we progress. Yeah. Did you enjoy your time off?
Yes, I did. Thank you. Yes, I did. It seems like an awfully long time ago now.
How many days did you have off?
Quite a few days. You know, I'm trying to remember when it was now, to be honest.
Yeah, like more than a week, or?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
Are you by yourself, or you got anybody else with you?
No, I'm on my own. I'm in my home office, so I'm just me and you.
Right, brilliant. Okay. Before we go any further, so you're aware that I've received a letter with an email with an attached PDF.
I am.
Nominally from Mr. Barber.
Yeah.
Before I go any further, what are your thoughts, bearing in mind, recalling everything that you'd said and, for want of a better term, promised in our previous phone call, what are your thoughts of how everything has happened since you and I finished that phone call?
Yeah. I am aware that Matthew instigated independent investigation into the whole situation. And so, as far as I'm concerned, that investigation was done independently of our office and came back with, there were lessons to learn in terms of the sort of setup of the limited company and the close down of it, but that there was nothing to be concerned about in relation to independence of Ms. Waskett and Ms. Reid.
Okay, so just holding you to your words there. So you said that he's instigated an independent investigation of quote the whole situation. Bearing in mind all our conversation about the somewhat 27,000 words, appendices, all that malarkey. Can I just finish? The recognising, of course, that the topic, as serious as it is about Ms. Waskett and Ms. Reid, wasn't quote the entirety of the situation, was it? Do you know what I mean? That, just with regard to that point, what percentage? That's perhaps unfair. It's asking you to formulate that. What of the multiple points raised and asked of Mr. Barber in my 27,000 words, what of those were referred to an independent, as you call it, investigator? Was it simply the matter of Miss Waskett and Mrs. Reid?
Yes.
So that's not all of it then, is it? But yeah, go on.
No, you're quite right. You're quite right to correct me on that. From our perspective, that part of it was a big part of the situation, because we wanted to be absolutely satisfied. What he did do was meet with PSD to look at their handling of the rest of the situation as well. So he did scrutinise the elements of your complaint that related to the professional standards department as well.
Which was a lot of it, right? Yeah. Can you? What I find interesting is that one is, and I'll speak frankly here. I don't. You'll forgive me if an unseen, unheard of scrutinisation from Matthew Barber to the PSD that doesn't particularly impress me. But there's no mention of that in the letter. The other one is I know people like to use the word independent, but you know when kids argue and there's a kid that's losing an argument and the kid goes to the other kid on the playground, well, yeah, I spoke to my mate and he agrees with me. It's like, and there's no mention of who the kid is. It's just like it's what's known in argumentative circles on the internet as appeal to false consensus. So this supposed independent investigation by an unnamed, third party.
Yeah.
If this were this, and I'll be perfectly honest, you'll forgive me given my experience with TVP. If until proven otherwise, I don't even believe this is nothing other than words typed. I have no proof, and I live in a world of proof and evidence, and like you guys, I have no proof that that's even happened, because. And the simple thing is this, and the clue's in the name, Gillian, an independent investigation is independent. Now, if it was independent, it would treat my complaint and me as the complainant and the body against whom I'm complaining, namely TVP and more specifically various factors and people within it, it would treat those people as equals. So it would speak to me, an independent inquiry done by anybody would speak to me. It would report back to both parties involved. The idea that separately Mr. Barber just asks one of his Masonic buddies who's also a PCC to just have a look at this as well. Exactly what material was handed to that? I'm going to go just for conversational purposes on the assumption that it did happen, which I'm not inclined to necessarily believe, but whatever, right? Even if that's happened, the nature of that, the metadata around that, the communication of that, how that was introduced, precisely what amount of the complaint was given to that individual to review, what files were given to that individual to review, what individuals did he speak with. He certainly didn't speak with me. Forgive me if I'm assuming it's a male, right? A lot of PCCs are. So like that's ridiculous. That's I mean, let's return to that adjective. Does that strike you as professional? If in fact it was done, and let's just assume conversationally that it was.
I can guarantee you it was done, because I oversaw and I was kept independent for any appeals process. So when we
kept independent, how were you kept independent?
So if you let me explain to you.
Okay, go on.
So essentially, the decision that Matthew made was that there should be an independent disciplinary investigation into the allegations that you made against Miss Waskett and Miss Reid. Now, for the purposes of GDPR, we cannot share that detail with you, because that detail is private to the individuals involved in it. The outcome of it we have shared with you. Now, essentially, the decision was made to go for an independent investigation. It was then sent to another professional standards department in another police force. It wasn't one of Matthew's PCC buddies. It was sent to another police force for them to assess your complaint and look at what ordinarily would they do in those circumstances. They came back with an independent investigation needs to be carried out into misconduct. That was undertaken, and the investigation was done by an equivalent to me in that other police force, but in the Police and Crime Commissioner's office, because they would understand the context within which Miss Waskett and Miss Reid worked. That investigation took place and came back to confirm that there should be no concerns about the independence. There was no evidence that either Miss Waskett or Miss Reid were making decisions in relation to any cases that could not be upheld due to any perceived lack of independence. It took quite a while for it to be conducted. The investigation received your full file that you sent into the PCC's office, and they reviewed that full file in terms of the complaint, that so narrowly in relation to the complaint against Miss Waskett and Miss Reed. And that, as you can imagine, for Miss Waskett and Miss Reed, although proceedings weren't carried for Miss Reed, because Miss Waskett was the one who was the manager in this situation. So the proceedings continued in relation to Miss Waskett, and the investigation was undertaken. And as you can imagine, that caused a huge amount of sort of distress to individuals involved. But I make no apology for that on behalf of Matthew as PCC, because we have to be seen. I completely am on your page in relation to we have to be seen to be completely independent and looking at ourselves in a really independent way.
Can I just say, it's not that you need to be, you've betrayed your thinking there in an amusing way, Gillian. It's not that you need to be seen to be independent and fair. You need to be it. It's not about the optics, Gillian. It's about being, okay? Yeah, it's ontology, absolutely. Not perception. Can I just quote you on something there? So you're saying to me that initially that went to a different forces professional standards department.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah,
brilliant. Okay. On the letter I've got from Mr. Barber, he mentions it going that it was looked at investigated independently by a different PCC's office. So he describes it as having been. That's quite an important distinction. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying to you. I did actually say that to you, Ben. What I said to you, and I'll repeat it, was it initially went to another police force for them to do the severity assessment on it as to whether it was misconduct or gross misconduct. They came back with misconduct, and then an equivalent member of staff to me in another PCC's office carried out the investigation for us.
Okay, Gillian, if you're now telling me this, which is appropriate that you do, I'm well aware that I've made a complaint amongst other things. Like we'll get to the fact that the Waskett Reed issue is but one of a number of issues to which I wrote to Mr. Barber about. We'll come to that in a moment. But if we given that I know about me complaining about Waskett and with regard to Reed, because it was me that wrote the bloody thing, and indeed has mentioned that suspicious connection on multiple occasions in prior communications. So given that there's no revelation to conceal there, which is why quite sensibly you've just told me what you've just told me, and given that, albeit in a hell of a lot more detail, you're now telling me what Mr. Barber's supposedly done, do you not feel it appropriate, especially given your promises of, Ben, I'm going to keep you in the loop at every stage. I'm all about communication, Ben. At every stage, I want you to feel that I'm, quote, your words, not a prick. I'm going to keep you. Do you not feel that was that either going along, ideally, or at point of completion, that process, as you describe it, is something that I could have been made aware of?
So, first and foremost, you can't quote me as ever having said I'm a prick.
I didn't say you were a prick.
Because that's not language.
No. I didn't say that I am quoting you. I am quoting you. You said I will prove that I'm not a prick. That's because I'd said a number of people had been pricks in how they dealt with it. You found that funny. You laughed and you said, Ben, I can assure you that it'll be. And you said, I think your exact words were, yeah. You said, I think your exact words were, Ben, and you'll be able to see that, that I'm not a prick. I think were your exact words. I've got it written down somewhere what you said. Yeah, okay. But the point, yeah. So I am quoting you there, I'm afraid. I can, So I've got it here. You told me that you would take the complaint one stage at a time, and at each stage I would get a sense of whether you were a prick, brackets your words, or someone genuine, your words. So, but never mind that. So yeah. So to my question then, with or without the word prick, do you not feel that process as you've just outlined it there is something that I could have been made aware of?
I believe that Mr. Barber has written to you to give you reassurance in relation to the fact that he said, he's reviewed the complaint against Miss Waskett and the outcome letter provided by Mr. Hammond and satisfied that due process was followed. Maybe, from your perspective, he could have reassured you by telling you that it had been an independent investigation. I will pick that question up with him to just understand what made him not say that, as it were. But I think he's perfectly entitled to just say to you he is satisfied. And, you know, if you come back and ask him for more detail on that, then, you know, you're perfectly entitled to do that. You're also perfectly entitled to, you know, complain about the way he's handled it, as I've no doubt, you know, is on your mind. The reason I'm talking to you in the way that I'm talking to you is to reassure you that, you know, there was independence in the investigation, and it wasn't a decision that was taken lightly by any stretch of the imagination in Mr. Barber's mind, but it was felt that it was the appropriate thing to do.
Gillian, do you understand, just a quick one, just before we proceed, do you understand the difference between, you sometimes hear this phrase in films and other things, do you understand when people say show, don't tell? Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, no, I do. I do understand what
okay,
what you mean by that.
Like, if I am, and I'm not seeking reassurance, I'm seeking process and justice and accountability. But in terms of reassurance, the way you reassure a member of the public, a complainant, if you will, that things have been done properly, is you don't just write out the words as if by enunciation alone from on high it achieves something. You don't just say, this has been done properly. You evidence to them that it's been done. In simplistic terms, you show, you don't tell. Like, I know Mr. Barber can get a bit pious from his pulpit, but by his words alone, he does not make it so. A number of previous individuals have tried this exact tack, not least the professionally late Mr. Hammond, who says, well, you know, this is the end of this now, or I've, you know, whatever. Just by people, when I'm writing to an organisation that I don't just believe to have been erroneous and corrupt in the past, but I can evidence the fact. When I'm writing to that organisation and I'm writing to an individual, like, to asking him to look at that, who is inextricably linked with that organisation, right, in a way that I don't think necessarily respects the spirit of independence and, like, sort of as the way that the PCCs were supposed to be done. It's not a terrible thing on my part if that individual just saying, oh yeah, by the way, it's fine. If I don't take that at face value, like, you'll forgive me if I'm looking for more proof, and there's that word again, than Mr. Barber says it's okay. I mean, you know, like, you just show me. It's just like, just show me the evidence. I'll take the point of what you've just said as to that process. I'm 45. I don't quite have the memory that I used to have. So if you could just write to me, and if you could explain, just lay out that process as you've just explained it to me, and if you could put that in a letter that lets me know what was done, and if possible when it was done and where it was done and by whom and all that sort of stuff, right? So because you've been, to your credit, you've been more descriptive there about that apparent supposed process certainly than Mr. Barber was. So on that point then, I'm like, great, can I have a copy of that for my records? Just so to conclude on that point, as it stands, I wrote a letter some time ago to the PCC using an email address that was given to me by Nick James from the PSD or whatever he works with. So I said, right, his response to a whole load of things was crooked and crock, and then he just preempting that I was going to want to take it further. He says, oh, if you want to write to the PCC, you can write to him on, and we'd mentioned it conversationally, All right, I'd said, look, and I, because I'd written historically to a joint letter to the PCC, to the then PCC, Mr. Barber's predecessor and mentor, and I'd written a joint letter then to that PCC and the then Chief Constable, and I'd got nothing back on that one, right? So I'd mentioned that to Nick James, and he'd said to me, oh, if you want to write to the PCC, you can use this email address. So I used that email address, which I was told was going to the eyes of the PCC, and the person who responds to that is Vicky Waskett, who is most definitely not the PCC, and then spends a weird amount of the feedback I have back from her justifying her involvement with it, which is a strange amount to put in any letter. Like if somebody writes to you about something and you're writing back, you don't spend half the letter explaining why it's acceptable that you get involved, but and this is an individual, and at that point my complaint was about a number of issues, but a large part of which was my complaint about Sierra Reid, and not just my innate complaint about Sierra Reid, but the way that had been dealt with. People had stood that down, pretending they'd not received letters, all that stuff that you and I discussed last time. So I'm writing to the PCC about something which is most definitely about this situation with Sierra Reid was handled wrong, and also, so yes, I am complaining about how my complaint against Sierra Reid was handled, but I'm also still complaining about Sierra Reid because it was never properly looked at. So this is a woman that told me lies. She forwarded lies about me, recorded as fact, to other individuals, which caused me no end of, to use your word, distress. I can assure you that that's caused me distress and continues to cause me distress, right? So basically, I'm right. So the Sierra Reid fraction of that message, that letter, that complaint was not zero, and it was not small. That Vicky Waskett, right, who owned a business and is Facebook buddies with Sierra Reid, there is no sensible interpretation of just common law understanding of conflict of interest, not to mention the 2020 regs. There's no version of that where somebody's business partner, ignoring the fact that Waskett wasn't the PCC, when I had an email exchange with her, she was willfully coy about whether or not the PCC himself had seen it. She was ignoring all that stuff that's suboptimal, and that's being kind about Waskett's handling of that. There is no version where somebody's business partner who has and Facebook mates and work colleague, and just a simple Google search reveals all manner of paperwork and letters on that those two have signed together. They're thick as thieves if they share a figurative desk, if not a literal desk at one point. And there is no version of that where Waskett making a decision whether to progress or non-progress my complaint against her business partner. There is no version of that is anything other than a laugh out loud whopping conflict of interest. And for Mr. Barber, I know Mr. Barber is canny at distancing himself from accountability, but to say, well, on the strength of other people's thing, as it stands and as it was phrased and put to Mr. Barber, this was an opportunity for Mr. Barber to say that's not right. And as I phrased it, failure on his part to act on this will be interpreted at future legal occasions as you are okay with that kind of crookedness going on. And now Mr. Barber can make every attempt in the letter to me to say how it's not him doing it, he's passed it on to others. Yeah, but the buck stops with him because he's the PCC and he's paid a great amount of money for that role and responsibility. Do you know what I mean? And so as it stands, Mr. Barber has been made clearly aware that people are intercepting communication that was meant for him, and that they're non-progressing things when the complaint includes their mate. Now, there's and so it's not just as a result of my historical dealings with Thames Valley that I'm innately suspicious of this supposedly wonderful independent process. It's just that I cannot believe in good faith that any legitimate independent process looked at that, if given the full facts, and said, yeah, no, that's okay. And now what you said to me The only bit, the bit you said to me was that somebody had, and correct me if you need to correct me on this. And so, like I say, this is why I need you to write to me and spell that out, so I've got it in pen and ink. But you said that it had gone to somebody else, and that they had then said that did need to be looked at. Yeah, am I quote? Yeah, okay.
That's right. It went to PSD for them to do an initial severity assessment.
So a different force is PSD.
Yeah.
Right, okay. How different a force? Like, so not a linked force, not Hampshire?
No, not Hampshire.
Right, okay, I know what you buggers are like, yeah.
They're not that stupid.
Well, it's not about stupid, but yeah. Okay, so a different force. I don't know.
It's about perception here, you know.
Yeah.
We do think about how someone like yourself, who's going through this, might perceive every action.
Again, Gillian, it's not about you. You make the mistake of that. It's not about perception. It's about actuality.
No, it is because I've explained to you the actuality of the situation. However, your perception is still that we are crooked.
Okay, but the actuality is that I have no independent evidence of an independent inquiry. I have no independent evidence of what matters and material were given to an independent people. Those independent people have not spoken to me. They've not reported back to me. All I have is a few typed words on a PDF from an organisation that has lied to me consistently over the last 8 to 9 years. Like, you'll forgive me if by words alone that doesn't quite cut the mustard. Like, so if you're saying, I mean, you know, ignoring your and my perfectly pleasant debate about whether it's about the actuality of things or the perception of them, and I think there's a great amount of problem with, yes, modern policing, but not least Thames. I mean, it was all about the perception and how you're perceived that has led Thames Valley into all sorts of problems in the past, not least the grooming gangs and all sorts of things. So perception based, how are we seen to be doing things, politics is kind of what gets you in the shit in the first place. But basically, ignoring that, what I'm saying is, like, I've got no evidence of any of that. Have I? If you're focusing on my perception is that it's terrible, because I've not got any evidence of that. So, like, notwithstanding our little philosophical discussion about perception, if you're honestly focused on my perception of it is that it's terrible. Do you know what I mean?
Thank you for that feedback. What I need you to do is to respond to Mr. Barber, asking for more detail, and I will make sure that he provides you with that more detail.
I got that letter already written, Gillian. Given that I've not heard from you, and that you identified yourself as I think the monitoring officer was the phrase you used, and that you were going to make sure this was done properly, and that you were reassuring me that, you know, that I thought, given.
Well, I was. However, you made it very, very clear to me that I was not to be involved in it.
That's absolutely not the case. No. Can I just clarify on that exact point, Gillian? Because this is important. What I took issue with yourself on, and I was very typically me. I sometimes teach for a living. I fall into the horrible habit of saying everything 3 times. But what the point I made to you was that within hours of for the eyes of Mr. Barber only bundle landing on special delivery at TVP's desk, that you were phoning me about it. Now, given that a large part of the complaint, by no means all of it, but given that a large part of that was about the historical interception of communication meant for the PCC himself, not his team, his secretariat, or anybody in his enduring stead, like literally him. Given that was a prior frustration I had that was outlined at length in that complaint, the fact that you phoned me up on that and were like seeking to reassure me on that, and I was like saying, no, look, I'm all about communication, but it's somebody other than Mr. Barber phoning me to tell me that your words, I'm going to be handling this, was not going to generate. And I said to you, nothing personal against you, Gillian, I'm sure. And I said to you, simply by you not being Matthew Barber, lucky you, right? Yeah. That anybody phoning me to say, you know, within hours of that arriving on the desk was only going to irritate me. Now, that was not, and I was quite clear on this, that was not a generic I don't want you ever involved with any more of this. Can I just finish? Include, because, and I said, like, because specifically I said there's obviously going to be a point at which Mr. Barber himself, if he investigates this properly, which he certainly hasn't, that he would obviously himself have to instruct other people, just secretarially, if nothing else, to help him with that. And I certainly wasn't. All I said on that point was that if you are, you know, buddies and mates with the Westgates and the Weeds of the world, I said, look, if you're like have coffee and Christmas cards with them, then you probably can't be involved with that. Your words, I think, were, I don't send Christmas cards. I said, I'm sure you do, right? Okay, but yeah, okay,
I don't.
yeah, fair enough, yeah, fair play, yeah, but you know, but that's the conversation we had, right? And then basically, so it's, and I wasn't saying you are not allowed any future involvement with this, so much so that when you and I agreed on what was going to happen, and if you remember, there was this, I'd outlined to you these two versions of how to proceed, which was slightly different, the main difference of which was on the one, I spoke to Mr. Barber after his investigation, but before he got, like, you know, and then on the other one, I still spoke to him after his investigation, but I had a pre-conversation with him first. I'll come on to that in a bit because that's my last point I've got to speak to you about. But basically, at that point, then I said, right, you know, I need you within, so how about this? Within 7 days, somebody's going to get back to me and let me know which one of those versions that you and I had quite usefully outlined, which one of those is it going to be in terms of how this is going to progress? Okay, well, feel free to modify at any point. Like I said to you, my phone's always on. I'm big on communication. You said so were you, right? So I said to you, I'd obviously prefer that phone call to be, or message to be for Mr. Barber, but I even said specifically, I said that can be you as well. So most definitely, I did not ban, prohibit, or anything. Not that you would heed such imperatives anyway, but I certainly didn't ban or prohibit your future involvement, for so much so I couldn't anyway, because if you were outlining to me that you were the monitoring officer, in your words that it was your legal responsibility to ensure it was done properly, I'm not quite sure how the powers work there, because a question to you I'd say is, well, given your role then, if you were to see Mr. Barber doing it improperly, what power do you have over him to tell him otherwise, other than in an advisory capacity? So, you know, but you know, that aside.
So in terms of legal stuff, I have the power to report him to the police and crime panel if he is doing anything illegal. In terms of anything else, you're absolutely right. It's an advisory capacity.
Right, brilliant. Now, but okay, so I've just cleared up that most definitely I did not tell you to have no future involvement with it, and most definitely, I mean, so much so that, like, you were promising me, Ben, I'll get back at every stage, Ben, I'm going to be getting back to you and all this sort of stuff. And so much so, if you are saying to me, Ben, I'm the monitoring officer and I have a legal responsibility to ensure he does this properly, like, I don't have powers to command you to not have that responsibility or occupational role, even if I wanted to. So it's not just that I didn't tell you to have no future involvement with it. I couldn't order that if I so chose. I mean, it's not I'm Joe bloody Public. I have no power to say, right, I don't want, like, Gillian involved. I like, what magical words can I utter that achieve that? You know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, that's why I'm just saying that.
When you have a complainant like yourself that makes it very clear to you that they only want to hear from the Police and Crime Commissioner.
That's not what I said, but carry on.
Matthew and I discussed that, and we're very clear that he would respond to you, and I monitored to make sure. Now, the investigation took some time, which was why there was the delay in...
Okay, can I pause you at that point then? So if whether it's about doing it properly, objectively and actually, or whether it's about my perceptions or whatever difference or combination of the two, if you're heeding my wishes, and you know, to your credit, you use a lot of language about what I'd like, my expectations. You know, there's a lot of that kind of knee-hugging language, which is fair enough. That's your way of communicating. But basically, the point you and I discussed was that within 7 days, like, Mr. Barber, ideally, or yourself, and I explicitly said those words, were going to get back to me. And the point at which you got back to me was not going to be in the 7 days. Yes, I've read the entire letter and here's my review. I was saying, well, one is I don't expect that, and two is I'd be highly suspicious if he'd done it in a week. But at that point, it wasn't just we're going to get back to you within 7 days, Ben, and it wasn't just simply any communication you get is going to be from Mr. Barber. Neither of those were the thing. The 7 days thing was that at that 7 days, I was going to be got back to, and at that point, it was going to be made clear to me by either yourself or Mr. Barber which one of those agreed versions that you and I had sort of penned out, which way that was going to go and how it was going to progress. Now, Mr. Barber, albeit on the last day, in that kind of slightly churlish way that TVP likes to do things, did write to me. There's none of those other issues with no clarification, because what I was saying to you was, I'm not saying I want this done within a certain time, and if it's done properly, given the length of wrongdoing and the amount of issues raised in the bundle, that it wasn't going to get done overnight, and I had no problem with the fact it was going to take a while, and I repeated myself on that point. But what I wanted was to be kept in the loop, and basically I wanted to be aware of what was happening and when and by whom, and basically. And that Mr. Barber was going to get back, or yourself were going to get back to me. I got back to within 7 days, and there's none of that. It's the most minimal thing going. It doesn't at all answer we're going to go with this version. And the reason it didn't was because quite clearly from day zero on this, Mr. Barber had no intention of allowing me to meet him. Because if he meets me, he is in earshot of me saying things to him. I'm able to directly put things to him, and then he's then on the record, as it were, for having done precisely bugger all about those concerns and complaints. Mr. Barber, if he's got times to... I follow this guy's Twitter just to make me laugh, because it's like, I know he's a politician, but it's like, you think, what other than what happened on this day, you think, what does this guy, gone to a good meeting, had a good chat about that, and it's like, I'm fairly certain this guy has got half an hour within his timetable to meet the likes of me. And I mean, the point I raised, I think, in the last conversation was when I said, given how long this has gone on, 8 to 9 years, given the amount of back and forth process or non-process or letters or whatever on this, given the enormity of correspondence, phone calls, everything, given the magnitude of my complaints, the length that this has gone on for, and right, if I don't meet the threshold for can I come and have a word with the person who is politically appointed and paid to be an overseer of that force, if I don't meet the criteria to meet him, who does? So Mr. Barber's decision to not only to not meet me, despite us just talking about it and me asking about it, but to not even, in that classic TVP way, to not even reference or acknowledge that request within his response is, and you can quote this phrase to him, it's cowardly. It's absolutely cowardly. It's pathetic. And I say that word having thought about the use of it. It's cowardly and pathetic. And it's like, because you yourself, to your credit, was saying, yes, I think Mr. Barber should speak with you. You formally said to me that not only did you think that he should meet me, but that you were going to recommend to him that he meet me. And by the sounds of things, you were very on board with I forget which version we outlined first. I won't say 1 and 2, A or B, but the version where I had a pre-meeting, half an hour, whatever, with him, so he could get a sense of what it was I was concerned and complaining about. Just, rather than just simply have after the investigation meeting or during the investigation meeting with him. And you made noises to the fact that you seemed to think that was a good idea and that you were going to recommend that version to him. So can I ask did you, as you said you would, recommend to Mr. Barber that he meet me? Yes or no?
You clearly have a different different recollection of our phone call than I have, because I would never say that I recommend that Mr. Barber meet you, because it is Mr. Barber's decision on who he meets and where he meets them and how he meets them. I would set out the situation to Mr. Barber and ask his opinion.
Are you honestly saying to me that at no point in that phone call did you use the phrase that you would recommend anything to Mr. Barber?
I am saying I would not have said I recommend that Mr. Barber meet you.
Okay, but so you're not saying then that you wouldn't have used the phrase I will recommend something to Mr. Barber?
No, I'm not saying I wouldn't have used the phrase I will recommend to Mr. Barber, but I would absolutely not have
Okay,
said that.
So if you've used the phrase to me, which you most definitely have, that you would recommend something to Mr. Barber, if in any matters, and Mr. Barber employs you for your role and your counsel, if you're in charge, that doesn't mean you don't listen to any of your underlings. It just means you have oversight. You have responsibility. Yeah. So given that, as you admit, you did use to me the phrase that you would recommend something to Mr. Barber, and there was absolutely nothing wrong, given that command structure, that you in your role would recommend something to Mr. Barber. That's perfectly acceptable. There's nothing wrong. You're doing nothing wrong, and indeed you're doing your job correctly by recommending things to your senior in that situation. So given that it's perfectly acceptable and indeed incumbent upon you in your role to recommend things to Mr. Barber, and given that, of course, he's his own man, of course he can make his own mind up, of course we're using the word recommend because you and I both understand that means you give him your position or opinion or advice on something, and he's entirely at liberty to ignore it. Now, given that you're perfectly okay and entitled to recommend him on anything, what is so weirdly unique and special that you're saying to me that you couldn't have recommended, even though you actually did say to me that you couldn't possibly recommend to him that he meet me, because your defense, because you're saying he's his own man, he makes his own mind up, but he's his own man and he makes his own mind up on anything. So what's different about that?
Say he's his own man and would make his mind up. You can't put words into my mouth. What I was going to say to you was, our advice to Matthew is that he speaks to our legal advisor before he meets with anyone that is making complaints, because it has backfired on numerous PCCs to meet complainants on a one-to-one basis, based on the fact that complainants have their perception and it could be completely different to his intention. So I would give him options in terms of what he can do, and then it would be for him to either seek legal advice from our legal advisor. You wouldn't accept that our legal advisor is Miss Waskett, because that would just be red rag to a bull.
Is your legal advisor Miss Waskett?
Yeah, of course she is.
Right, okay. So your legal advisor on whether or not Mr. Barber should meet me to discuss my perceptions of conflict of interest and corruption within his police force as I've experienced it, and most specifically evidenced by the conduct of Miss Waskett, but certainly not uniquely, on me complaining about that to Mr. Barber in a somewhat voluminous and time-taken bundle of legality sent to him that most specifically requests an audience with him. It followed up by a phone call with you in which I most specifically request an audience with him, and his decision on that is most proximately informed by his legal advisor, who is the very person about whom I'm complaining.
And to be really clear, on this occasion, he did not ask Miss Waskett about whether he should meet or not.
Who did he ask?
He did not involve...
Has Miss Waskett been involved in any aspect of this investigation after I said, from the moment my 27,000 words or whatever it was landed
Yeah, she was the subject. She was
No,
the
other than the
subject
subject. No, she's obviously the subject. She's obviously the subject. I wrote the complaint, remember, Gillian.
Yeah.
But other than her
She
being the
did, but
subject, has she
no.
had any involvement?
No,
None whatsoever.
none whatsoever.
Yeah, okay. Are you able to prove that? Are you able to prove what messages were sent, what command decisions were made? How, given her normal role of legal advisor, then, how was that then dealt with in a way that kept her out of the loop, given the obvious conflict of interest?
Because in terms of the complaint against her, as I've already told you, we went externally for that. In terms of the wider part of the complaint, Mr. Barber knows the law very well, and as he's explained to you in his letter, he has no power to re-review the complaints. There is nothing legally in his power to enable him, and he met with our PSD, the head of PSD, to discuss it.
Who's the head of your PSD at the moment?
Oh, God, bear with me while I get her name. Her name's escaped me for the moment. Bear with me.
You can get back to me on that, don't worry.
Yeah. Let me just look it up for you. So, in terms of your next steps...
No, hang on. No, we'll come to that in a sec. Because if you can, let me know before the end of this phone call who your head of PSD is.
Yeah.
But your PSD... Can I just go ahead here? So if Mr. Barber if you're saying to me, and obviously there has to be a certain sense where I go, okay, let's work with what you're telling me, right? I can't just sit here saying it's all bullshit. If Mr. Barber doesn't meet with Miss Waskett, not just about the bit about Sierra Weed, but about any other aspect of my complaint, right? Okay, because it's about me, and she's got a conflict of interest about me, not just because on specific parts of it she's the subject of my complaint. So any of it, she's not got neutral, no bias about anything, right? Okay, so any point of where she's advising anybody about me is a conflict of interest, given that I've complained about her. Yeah, okay, right, okay, and that is the law, okay. But basically, given then that he's not involving Miss Waskett, right, much as he'd normally like to, because she is involved with the thing I'm complaining about. Like, given that there is that, however well followed otherwise, understanding of conflict of interest. Yeah, which if done properly, I'm obviously going to applaud. Why then, in the same vein, is it not considered deeply problematic that when Waskett's the decision maker, she feel free to progress or non-progress complaints about her bloody business partner, a person with whom she's inextricably linked?
Business partners. They are not business partners. They literally had an idea one day, set up a limited company, and then closed it straight back down again, recognising that it was not appropriate to have it.
How quickly after opening that company did they close it down?
It was a couple of months, as far as I'm aware.
I think I can tell you now, it was a little bit longer than a couple of months, Gillian.
Yeah. I need to look back at the date.
I don't need to. I can tell you now, it was not done instantly.
No, it wasn't done instantly, but they never, ever, and this is...
Can I tell you something else, Gillian? At the point at which I wrote to Mr. Barber, and it was suspiciously intercepted by Waskett, yeah, at that point then, yeah, and there was an enormous delay for Waskett to get back to me on her decision. There was it was like months and months. There was a weird length of delay, even for TVP, who rightly or wrongly takes forever on things, and then weirdly asymmetrically imposes these weird 48-hour deadlines on me. Even for TVP, it was a long one. I've got it written down somewhere how many days it was. Right, okay, it was a lot. Right, okay, and then yeah. And yet, weirdly, when I then messaged her back about that, it turns into this almost real-time back and forth at weird o'clock at night, where she's emailing me when she was being awfully coy about whether or not the PCC had seen it, right? Okay, but given that in that weird length of time, for your amusement and interest, at the point at which she made the decision, at the point at which I first wrote to her and she initially wrote back to me, right, telling me she was going to be involved with it, at that point, she and Sierra were still co-directors according to Companies House. There is then an anomalous number of months of delay until I'm written back to, and in that interim period, and I'll stand corrected on this if I'm wrong, but I think last time I checked it, so but I think off memory, in that interim period, within that weirdly long length of time until I was then written back with her decision, which again, as I say, wasn't hers to make. Within that weird period, she then closes down the business with Sierra Reid. So that almost as if it was a suspicious version whereby, so that were she ever asked in court at the point at which you made that decision about whether or not to progress your complaint, the complaint before you about your business partner, she could say, well, at that point we weren't business partners. The point also is this: it doesn't matter whether at the exact point of decision making or action of process, at that point, whether or not Companies House had or hadn't been told that they disbanded that company. Although, as I say, the chronology of it tells a tale. The point is, the conflict of interest thing is already glowing red hot at that point. If you and I, Gillian, had ever opened up a company together, and maybe we will, who knows, right? Let's say, yeah, you and I open up a company together, and even if we don't do a lot with it, it was done on a beer mat, we think about it, we get together, like, even if if at any point ever I'm in a position of formal responsibility where I'm asked to investigate you, there is no version of strict or spirit of the legislation adherence to conflict of interest and legislation where you don't go, I'm sorry, Gillian and I are buddies, we continue to be Facebook friends, we work together, we've got practically the same role over a number of years, and not only that, at one point we were so cozy, we had a business, we set up a business together. I've got plenty of friends, Gillian, I've never once set up a business with them. But if you're setting up a business, you can get, it's like, if you're setting up a business with somebody, you're pretty thick as thieves with them. So the exact specifics, however cynically done, timing wise, of, oh, they just set up this, that's not a defence in law. The point of the conflict of interest is that a decision, and again, ignoring the fact that it wasn't her decision to bloody make, but notwithstanding that, a decision she has engineered herself, which is suspicious in itself, to be in a position to progress or non-progress a complaint about a member of staff, and that member of staff is somebody who A, she works with, B, she's buddies with, C, she's Facebook friends with, and D, at any point she's been so close to that they were like, oh no, let's set up a doggy company or whatever it was. Now that would be, in any court of law, that would be considered that there is too proximate a relationship between those two people for the one to not, like, distance herself from this and say, like, I can't be the one that does this. Like, now, so the exact, and as I say, the tale tells, the timing tells a tale in itself, but the exact specifics of whether at point of decision as she formally records it, brackets, notwithstanding the weird and conveniently long delay, close brackets, the point at which whether or not at that point they disbanded the company, your point of, oh, they never really did a lot with it, they just opened they limited it and they did the name, and whether they made fucking millions or whether they just did it as an idea and then were just too busy to get around and never did anything, that's absolutely irrelevant, because either way it speaks to their familiarity with each other, their respective interest in each other, and their proximity. And like, so it's just no defence to say, oh, well, they never really did much with it as a company. That's do you not understand that?
As Mr. Barber says to you in his letter, we have our cases that Miss Waskett and Miss Reid deal with regularly reviewed by our professional ethics and standards panel.
I'd love to know who sits on that panel. I'd love to know.
It's members of the community.
Okay.
So it's members of the community that have put themselves forward to be involved in our scrutiny.
Okay, can I just add, Gillian, the decision of any panel is only ever as good as how and what information is presented to it. I've not been in a position to present evidence to this panel. I've certainly not been in a position to present evidence to the other PCC that was initially involved. I've certainly not been in a position to present evidence and argue my case to the other professional standards department that was involved. So as to a classic technique, so that by itself, a classic technique of you guys is you abridge. So for example, you know, at some hilarity, I sent a great amount of words in that bundle, that document, to TVP, right, to Mr. Barber. Okay, there is a lot in there, right? It's sectional. The reason, if you remember our conversation about, you know, the appendices and me saying it needs to be kept with the body of the letter, I think my analogy was it's not like a bloody map in the back of Lord of the Rings, right? Okay, I might have said The Hobbit, I can't remember. And basically, like that, there's a lot in there, including some definite sections where it specifically asks Mr. Barber to act on or comment on certain things, which is completely ignored. Right, yes, sequentially, there is... my previous letter had been at the dodgy, perverted, bloody Mr. Hammond, right? Okay, yeah, yeah, the idea of him lording it or ruling over anybody else makes me laugh out loud, right? Okay, yeah, right, but basically, so I had written to that idiot. Right, well, to be fair, he might not be an idiot, he's certainly a perv. And I'd written to that guy, and yes, chronologically, sequentially, I heard back from him, and his letter was bullshit and all that sort of stuff. The letter sent to Mr. Barber was an all-inclusive, this is everything, this is putting everything before you, and it made a historical list of all sorts of other things. What TVP does, which is an outrage, is attempt to tie its own hands deliberately by its own red tape and just sort of say, well, I'm only allowed to look at this bit, I'm only allowed to look at this bit. That's not how it works. But what you do to do that is you deliberately reduce the scope of anything. So, for example, the letter I've got from Mr. Barber on August 25th says, opens with, thank you for your complaint letter dated 13th of April 2023. Yes, it was a complaint letter. And yes, you could call it a letter, and yes, it was date sent then, in which you complain about the conduct of Paul Hammond, who was previously the chief executive. Now, that's a sleight of hand there, because yes, in that letter, I do complain about Paul Hammond, very much I do. So when he says, in which you complain about the conduct of Mr. Paul Hammond, who was previously the chief executive of the Office of the Police Crime Commissioner, full stop. Now, this is very typical of TVP's sleight of hand. So it's not saying specifically out loud, like, we have singularly classed all of that 27,000 words as purely a complaint against Mr. Hammond, and it's only dealt with in that capacity. By the way, he's no longer in our employment, and so we have no ability to refer him to whatever, right? You're not specifically formally saying that, but there's a sleight of hand whereby you kind of do that, because the way that the opening paragraph of how that's written is to so that if it's read by anybody else, it gives the impression that what I sent to you on the 13th of April was singularly and just in its entirety just a complaint letter about Mr. Paul Hammond, which it most definitely was not.
The third paragraph is the bit in which he then brings in your previous complaints, which are the body of that letter, as well as the bits about Miss Waskett and Miss Reed. He said very, very clearly to you that he has no power under law to re-review those complaints.
Right. If a complaint is handled suspiciously, right, and also Thames Valley Police seems to have enormous problems with the idea that the PSD itself can be the subject of a complaint. So, like, it's fascinating what you do then, notwithstanding the IOPC's comedic confusion on that point. But when I complain about something and the way in which it's handled is disgraceful, as an example, my complaint at one point, and I think about Reed, was stood down by Westwood, or whatever his name is, because he said, oh, you didn't reply back to us. right? So I put in a complaint against Reed, amongst other things. A complaint, by the way, which an initial complaint, by the way, which I initially submitted at Sarah Harper's suggestion. So at one point, I am written back to by your staff, and I am told that my use of the complaints process is abusive and harassment. So I tell my tale at great length, as you know I will, right? And I tell that tale to Sarah Harper, who at that point was the complaints outcome manager. And what felt to me like in good faith, Sarah sent an email that she CC'd me into, because unlike other people, Sarah at that point liked to involve you in process. You could see what was going on. So she CC'd me into the email that says, can we have a copy of everything niche, C&C, everything for Mr. Rich, right? There's then this weirdly, suspiciously anonymous from on high thing saying, oh, no, this is like confidential. Okay, so despite me asking, and I've asked at several points, including within that letter to Mr. Hammond, to Mr. Hammond, but also to that letter to Mr. Barber, I've said, I asked for this. It's never been given. I've never been given all of the information I've asked for. Right? You've wiped your arse on the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office is imperative. The ICO wrote to Thames Valley and gave instruction for you to abide by the request of my subject data, whatever. The stuff I've had back from you guys, where this was just completely blankly ignored. It was just completely blankly ignored, right? The bullshit excuse we get at one point is, oh, well, somebody was on maternity leave. And I'm like, really? Like that's the simplicity of how this works then. So I never get that information because, as I explained to you in the previous phone call, it would checkmate people, right? I speak to, and then with regard to my complaint, Sarah Harper, hearing about me, because I'd gone as a result of Sarah Reed, and she lied about this, she wrote to me saying, no, there's no such information on file, when she sent a bundle of bloody lies that had like abroad, which caused me no end of trouble, right? Okay, and basically, no, Ben, there's no such thing. Like I don't, like the data officers made every available effort. No, there's no such thing, right? Okay, so I complain about I'm telling that to Sarah Harper. So I'm saying, look, this isn't right. Sarah Harper, right, in her professional role as the outcome manager, says specifically, because I'm complaining about Reed at that point, she says, would you like to put in a complaint about Sierra Reed? And in my far more naive years back then, I said, oh, right, yeah, I kind of almost didn't realise you could put in a complaint against non-officers. And she says, yeah, you can put in a complaint against any staff, right? I said, okay, fine. I said, brilliant. So Sarah herself, at her suggestion, having heard all my concerns and complaints, right, whether or not there's office politics between her and Sierra Reed, that's not for me to guess, but she says at that point, Ben, having heard everything you have to say, you're a person, Ben, who's not happy with how your complaints about everything have gone to you're not happy with the outcome of your complaint. So I'm talking about my unhappiness about the outcome of my complaint to the complaint outcome manager. So everything about that is correct. I'm speaking to the right person. It's right. It's correct for me to be speaking to Sarah. It's correct for her to be involved in that conversation. Okay. I tell her everything. She then, in her professional capacity, says, I recommend then that you put in a complaint against Sierra Reed. And I then said, great. She even said, I'll draft that for you if you send me the fill-in details. So to ensure that it's done properly. So she said, there's a back and forth few emails, which I've got a copy of, where she basically says, I need you to fill in. So I filled this in, Ben, on the basis of the information you've given me as you outlined conversationally. Can you just fill in the dates as proper so that I don't want to get it wrong, right? Okay, right. So I then do that. That then gets, I am told, submitted. Okay, in emails from, I forget her name, Mandy Reed was one of these idiots, Westwood, all the usual idiots, right? And at one point, my use of my complaint against Reed is classed as, you guys' language, and I'm perfectly aware of what you're trying to achieve with this language, is classed as abusive and harassment. As if me having, one is me complaining against, me trying to hold a member of your staff to professional and lawful conduct. It's as if, how dare you, Mr. Rich, have the audacity to sort of challenge us on what we do, to use that kind of language about a member of the public complaining about your words perceived, my words actual wrongdoing. That's a disgrace, okay? But also, not only that, like your own like staff, your own people, having just initially heard my verbal, this is everything that's happened, and I gave Sarah this breakdown, her recommendation, having heard that as somebody who works for Thames Valley and is professionally employed as the then, I don't know what she still is, complaints outcome manager, she says, Ben, I recommend that you fill out this, that we do a complaint then. So yeah, can I just not going to say this? No, but I'm just going to say this because this leads to the point I'm saying. So I then fill that out, and I am described as an abuser and a harasser for doing that when A, my reasons for complaining are completely valid, and B, this was ratified, endorsed, suggested, even written by one of your own staff. So to vilify a complaint that came in that was authored, yes, following consultation from me on the points of fact, was authored by your own staff, to then respond to that is ridiculous. I don't know how that made... Hang on, I'm almost finished. So I don't know how that made Sarah feel. Then that goes through, and then somebody like Westwood or Reed kicks it into touch instantly, right? Okay, and then, but I'm obviously given the right to reply. I reply. I can remember at the time I had a bloody migraine. This shit gives me migraines, so I had to dictate to somebody, and they typed it out, and I said, right, I read it. I said, right, fine, and I sent it. Another how many quid? Special delivery, turns up at the desk. I then don't hear anything. Okay, I then end up having a phone call with Westwood, right? And I say, why have you, because, finally, after ages, I eventually get a letter back saying, your complaint has been, I forget the phrase, sorry, apologies, Gillian, like discontinued or whatever, because you didn't write back to us, right? Okay, right? So basically, I immediately get in touch. I'm like, I completely wrote back to you. I wrote 5 pages. What are you on about? And then the churlish response from Westwood was, oh, well, we didn't get that. And I said, well, if I'm quite enthusiastic about this complaint to begin with, you didn't think it was worth a phone call to chase it up. But B, you did get that because it was signed for at your desk. So don't tell me you didn't get it, right? And I then get this laugh out loud, piss take voice on the phone saying, Mr. Rich, it's amazing what can get lost between the front desk and our office, right? And I'm saying to him, you're just taking the piss about the fact that correspondence sent to you, recorded special delivery, not just recorded delivery, sent to you that is signed for at the desk. So your initial knee-jerk defence is say, oh, we never got it. I then say, you did get it, it was signed for. You then modify your bullshit to, oh, well, it's amazing what gets lost between the front desk and our office. So he says that, thinking it's a checkmate. So I then say, okay, fine, let's hold you to that. I know damn well that that's not what's happened, but fine. Okay, can you CC me into the correspondence leak, the data protection flag that you need to raise because, confidential shit, making criminal accusations against staff as a hard copy document is now ready to be picked up off the floor and opened by anybody if what you're saying is true. He laughs out loud. He says, I think we both know that's not going to happen. This is the level of piss take. So when Mr. Barber, who is employed and paid a great deal of money for his oversight role, if he simply wants to say, oh, I don't have powers to look at these things, the default excuse from Thames Valley when every stage of how a complaint has been, quote, investigated is bullshit. For Mr. Barber to say, well, I can't look at this because it's already been looked at, what is the point of his job? Because by the time anything comes to him, because what he's saying other than that is, unless by weird coincidence something happens in the police force and the first person to hear of it is Mr. Barber and it hasn't yet been handled by the innately corrupt PSD, right, then unless that's the access trajectory, I can't ever get involved because by definition any and all matters being brought before Mr. Barber will have already been investigated. And the point for me to then write to him saying these, and the largest section of what I'm complaining about is the professional standards department. Yeah, it's okay. It's the Reeds, it's the Westwood, I can't remember his name. It's the Nick James. It's all those cronies, right? And I'm complaining about the complaints department. And so for Mr. Barber to just say, oh, well, yeah, that's already been looked at. Now, he has power and role to have things looked at. Yeah, this, like, so, because otherwise Thames Valley Police have got use and abuse this permanent get out of jail free card, which is we can do an absolute facetious and deliberate shit show of a pretend perception needs investigation where we're just completely covering for our own as typical, and as long as we then decry that has been investigated, anybody who comes after that can't look at it because, well, it's already been investigated. I mean, that's absolutely ridiculous. And to that, I'd say, what's the point of Mr. Barber being paid a salary? Do you get what I mean? Like, what is the point?
So,
Do you take my point on that?
We've been on the phone for an hour and 15 minutes now.
I've been trying to deal with this for 9 years, Gillian.
I know you have.
This is shit on my life for 9 years, Gillian. You'll forgive me if this going past 6 o'clock doesn't. Yeah, and I've just had another crock. And I've had another load of crock, right? So and yeah, so
your options are now to respond to Mr. Barber's letter, which you said you've already drafted, which is fine. You have the option of putting a complaint in to the police and crime panel about the way that Mr. Barber has handled your complaint, and they are a group of local councillors who are on the police and crime panel, and they hold Mr. Barber.
I'm aware of who they are, Gillian. I've even gone to the pedantic detail. I tend to vote Conservative myself, but I've even gone to the pedantic detail of working out what political parties they're in and who of them might not like Barber. I mean, that's the level of preparation I have to give to these things.
No,
Do you know what I mean? So I'm well aware of that panel. But all I'll say, Gillian, is to specifically ask you is you've given me verbally on the phone your account of what happened. I am specifically asking you, it doesn't need to be a response letter covering every and all aspects of this conversation, but I'm asking you to repeat what you said to me about how this was investigated, in what order and to whom. I'm just simply asking you, you can do it in bullet points. If you can just send me, don't even consider it a formal letter, if you can just send me an email, just points of the meeting, if you will, right? Like just just telling me what you tell me about how and to whom and in what order this was investigated, because my perceptions, to use your word, would be very much appreciative of that. Do you know what I mean? Can I just ask you one more thing? My point and my recollection is that you said that you would be advising Mr. Barber that he meet me. You're now reluctant to admit that, okay? I'm not going to force you on that. But now, just between you and I, in your opinion, and this is entirely your opinion, you're welcome to give it, given, and I'm talking about immediately after when you and I had another lengthy phone call the other month, in your opinion, given everything that's gone on, given the nature of the complaints, plural, right, and the length and severity of all of this, in your opinion, would an honest, accountable police force finally have me down there to speak to somebody, ideally Mr. Barber? In your opinion, as somebody who works in an advisory, a regulatory capacity in and around the police process, do you think that if you have a member of the public who's going to the trouble of, like, I'm not just scrawling crayon on a wall, it takes no small amount of effort for me to construct these letters. I have other things to be doing. It's you guys' day job. This isn't my day job. So I'm having to do this, given the length this has gone on, the specific and informed, and without blowing my own horn, arguably articulate and well-formed nature of my complaint letters. I'm not just shouting in scribble, right? I've got very specific legal points, given how long this has gone on, given the infuriating constant level of piss take I've experienced. Do you not think I'm a member of the public asking for audience? Okay, so do you think I should be granted audience with Mr. Barber?
If you pause for a minute to let me
Okay,
answer.
brilliant. Do you think I should?
I would want to understand the outcomes that you wish to achieve from that meeting before I even considered answering that question. And I'm not going to sit here and hear what those outcomes are.
I'm not asking you to, Gillian. I'm not asking you to, Gillian. Yeah, and can I just ask this?
I would ask you to be really clear about the outcomes that you would want to achieve by that face-to-face meeting, because at the moment I'm not really clear on those, and I think Mr. Barber could potentially spend days sitting down with you talking about this and get nowhere because we're not clear on those outcomes
I don't think in years of me talking about this that an absence of clarity and specificity is the issue here. I think to characterise Thames Valley Police having so far not done anything resembling the right thing as somehow my fault, I don't think that's fair.
I'm not saying, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying it's anybody's fault. What I'm saying is there is so much has gone on. I would want to see some really clear outcomes that you want to achieve from that meeting with Mr. Barber.
In terms of outcomes then, for your outcome then, as somebody who identified herself as the monitoring officer and that it was your legal responsibility to ensure that this was all done properly, in your opinion, from the moment you and I ended our phone call the other week or the month, whenever it was, in your opinion, given everything I'm saying, the nature and the length of these issues, do you think...
I'm not drawn into answering that.
Why not? Why not?
Because
that's your professional job. You're paid to have that opinion, Gillian. That's your role.
I'm not going to be drawn in a one-to-one conversation with you.
Okay, it's not a one-to-one. You can invite as many people into a room to answer this. You are telling me, and you chose to freely tell me about this. You've identified your role. You are telling me that your role in this...
Mr. Barber hasn't done anything illegal.
But I'm not saying Mr. Barber's done anything illegal necessarily. I'm asking you about this.
But that's my monitoring officer role, is to make sure he stays on the right side of legal.
Okay. And
it's not to tell him. I have no power to tell Matthew to do A, B or C. I can advise him, I can suggest to him, and what I'm saying to you is...
So you can advise him, yeah?
I can advise him, I can suggest to him, but he is perfectly within his legal right to say to me, Gillian, I've heard what you've said, I'm not doing
that. I agree. So you can make recommendations to him then? Like, that's what you're saying?
I can advise him in terms of what I think he should do, and the answer that I've given to you about a face-to-face meeting is that I would want to have real clarity on the outcomes you would want to achieve.
Okay.
And I would also want there to be somebody else there at the meeting.
Okay, Gillian, I'm more than happy for you can bring every single name of every single person, going all the way back to that lying piece of shit now and Sormai, and everybody involved, the two pricks that were turned up on the street when I was down in Oxford and told lies about that. I would happily have every last one of you in that meeting. I've got no problem with anybody else turning up. I've spent the last how many years, to quote what I said to Nick James, like, traditionally the police chase people who do wrongdoing. Like I said to Nick James, I said, Nick, I'm the guy chasing you guys, asking for copies of this. I'm constantly asking for an audience. I am an individual who Thames Valley Police has communicated untruths about to not just other police forces in this country, but to a foreign court, right, which has horrendously caused me no amount of trouble and distress. I am, on the one hand...
If that's the case, Ben, why not go down a legal route for libel?
Because things time out, and because you guys deliberately play for time, and because at the point of initial involvement, not only was I not told, this is the point, Gillian, so when my initial involvement with Thames Valley Police ended in the winter of 2014, not only was I not told about those matters, I was told it was all fine. So as I've said, as I indeed said to you in the previous conversation, Gillian, and this is my point, like, it's not... If a police force is told untrue things about a person, at that point, in and of itself, it's not the police force's fault. The police gets lied to all the time. So the fact that some people... Yes, there was some dodgy stuff going on with phone calls done later on, but the fact that initially some people with a malicious agenda walk into a police station and tell what they know to be untruths about me to the police at that exact point, simply by being the recipients of that allegation. Of course, Thames Valley Police have done at that point absolutely nothing wrong. Where Thames Valley Police go wrong is they record those matters as fact. They've not qualified it within a speech mark of this was a statement, this person has made this. I even once bloody facetiously texted now and saw my saying, do you even know what a fucking speech mark is? Right? Yeah, they recorded it as fact, yes, because of the politics of the time. Oh, hang on a minute, we can badge this in our newfound, aren't we good at listening to women now, post-grooming gangs thing. It was all a load of things recorded as fact. I'm down as a domestic abuser and all sorts of stuff I've never done, right? Okay, this is recorded as fact. No attempt is made whatsoever by Naren Sormai or any other officers to seek what Americans like to call exculpatory evidence. No attempt is made to even verify this. There's not even an attempt to investigate it. So it's just written down as fact. It's not even got person X said this. It's not even within a statement form. Not only that, but when I have involvement with the police, at no point am I made aware of those allegations. No, it's perfectly acceptable policing for somebody to say to a member of the public, I'm terribly sorry, Mr. Rich, I'm afraid an allegation, however true or otherwise, I'm afraid an allegation of X or Y has been made against you. Now, very, very suspiciously, that was never said to me. It wasn't said to me at the time when I spoke with those weird coppers who were trying to drag me into a van. But then the moment I specifically asked my cousin asked whether I was under arrest, they then tried to leg it. It wasn't asked by those officers who lied and said I'd signed a caution when I hadn't. I wasn't told this when I had 2, 3, 4 phone calls with Naren Sormai afterwards. At no point was I told any of this. I kept asking, I don't see what I've done here. I don't see what I've done here. Even when I was written to by Naren Sormai about other matters which were untrue, even then he doesn't include any of this in it. Not only that, but when the last word we had from TVP, like winter 2014, was, we're terribly sorry about this. This must have been awfully upsetting to Ben. He hasn't done anything wrong. He's in the clear with us. If anything, we're a bit suspicious about these people that came and the exact words Naren Sormai said to my mother, herself a former police officer. He said, we were duped. These people duped us. So the police, and he is a policeman, I believe he still is, but certainly at that point, he was a warrant card holding police officer of your force. And he said to my family, with me sat next to my mum as she was on the phone, and he said, we were duped. We were duped. That was the exact language he used. He says, we were duped. These people told us things that were untrue and we were duped. And he said, and yes, there was a bit of political pressure for us. All about perception again. We're having sort of top down orders that we need to sort of be seen to be tough on certain things. And yes, they played us and we were duped, right? So those are his words. On the specific thing about weird vans being organised and people turning up, he specifically said this wasn't done through the control room. It wasn't on the log. When I checked the log, none of this was on it. This was done by weird private phone calls and something else was going on. His exact words were, I can't look into this any further. This has gone over me. Those were his exact words. He used the word corruption. He also used the word cult about my ex-girlfriend's friends, but that's a whole other thing, right? Okay, but at the point at which I finished that involvement with TVP, yes, I've had a horrible shit couple of weeks because of everything involved with that, but I am given the blessing of TVP, the only liaison I've had with your police force. At that point, final conversation with Naren Sormai is that they're very, very, TVP are very sorry I've had to go through this, that I'm not the villain. They recognise that they've been duped and that people were pressing buttons deliberately, and that I should really take legal action against those people, right? And at that point then, because I don't exist in life just to shit on the police, at that point then my concerns and interests move to, I need to sort this situation out. I need to address the other issues these people are telling about me. I need to make sure my ex is okay, because I've been told by a uniformed officer over the phone that she couldn't speak for herself, that it was like a cult. They wouldn't let her go by herself in the interview room. Like he says, it was very controlling. This is what I've been told. So I then proceed to a foreign country where I used to live, because I have to, like, I need to make sure this bloody girl's okay, because I'm told by one of your coppers that she wasn't. Yeah, I'm told by one of your coppers that people were telling lies. His words, we were duped. So there's no mention at that point. I'm not only not told, Ben, just to let you know, you've been crimed as being this and that. I'm told I've got a clear record and I've got their blessing. I'm told, if anything, they feel sorry for me because of how, these people knew how to press our buttons. That's the official, what I was told. End of communication from my involvement with Thames Valley Police in 2014. I never take people at their word, so I make an attempt. I phone up about a week later to whoever and I say, can I have a copy of any and all paperwork appertaining to me? And at that point then, rather than specifically saying to me, you need to fill out a subject data access request, they said, you're not allowed it, right? And I was like, whatever. So my attention moved, which was not true, but whatever. So my attentions then moved to Helsinki. So I proceed to get to Helsinki to try and sort this whole bloody situation out because I've been told I have the blessing of TVP that not only have I not, yes, we apologise for our initial confusion. We got it wrong. We were duped, his words. And all along at that point, there's all sorts of foul and horrible shit recorded as fact, not even contained within statements, recorded as fact by TVP. Right, I then end up in trying to sort this out. I meet my ex-partner. She gives me a hug and a kiss. She arranges to meet me. Next thing I know, I'm arrested. I'm falsely accused. A week later, I'm falsely accused of breaking into buildings I've never even been in, all sorts of stuff. This is a woman who in court had to admit on oath that she couldn't name a single occasion when I'd been even remotely aggressive to her. And yet I'm recorded on paperwork outside Fisher's restaurant, urgent response, domestic violence. Okay? I'm then standing before this court going, I don't get what's going on here. I don't get why I'm being treated like I'm Jack the Ripper. Because it turns out that court had been given all manner of bullshit by Sierra Reid, right, who went, like, here you go, here's all this untrue stuff, sent it to a private individual for, non-policing purposes abroad, which specifically became illegal immediately after that, right? I then go through two hearings of that. It's delayed for a couple of years. There's this weird embargo on any mention of Oxford by the prosecution at that point. I'm thinking, what the hell's going on here? Right, it's really, really weird, even though that court did make decisions. So when they had to decide on my guilt and they had points to prove, they said on the required component of this or that, I forget the exact point, we allude to, and then they quoted this thing from the Oxford material. So notwithstanding their legal error that, I'm damned on like situation about which I'm not allowed to cross-examine the witness, we're not allowed to provide corresponding testimony, yada yada. But basically those materials provided by Sierra Bloody Reid, written down as fact, like typed in as Ben definitely did this, all that change of emphasis in that kind of feminist inspired, instant use of the word victim. No, it's not alleged victim or complainant anymore. Oh, it's a victim, right? Yeah, all that crap from Thames Valley, not contained within statements, not properly laid out. Well, this was just alleged. This is Naren Sormai who said when these people had initially walked into the police station, they were saying how I'd physically attacked Sissy. He then says, well, when did they do that? Right? He was initially a bit of an all right policeman, according to him. They then said, okay, then she didn't actually attack her. But he's threatening her. So they said, well, when did he said to like us on the phone? He said, well, I then said to them, well, when did Ben attack him? Okay, well, he hasn't actually attacked her. He's sending letters. So at that point, he should have just said, hang on, you're making it up as you're going along. There's no record of any of this. The person who spoke the most to the police and spoke the most to those individuals was my cousin. There's no mention of her in any of the paperwork I've seen because it's not, the lone, evil, crazed ex-boyfriend stalker mythos kind of gets torpedoed by the fact that my small, blue-eyed, blonde cousin was the person liaising with the police. It's just ridiculous. So I then go through all that court process, and I being told that I have no idea why I'm being vilified so much, and I then finally years later, because I see some paperwork in my ex-lawyer's shit that she sends me, and it's got some material from Oxford. I'm like, hang on a minute, I didn't get a copy of this initially. We weren't given this. So basically, and I'd written to Sierra Reid. That was my first involvement with Sierra. She just happened to be the person that was the data person at that point. I know now you've got this wonderfully anonymising like data request system, so nobody's personal name gets given to it. It's another way of avoiding accountability, right? And at that point then I'm saying to Sierra, because I'm thinking, hang on a minute, there's all this shit about me on file. This is not true. What bloody shit, what nonsense is that this is done? This has caused me, the lies not investigated by TVP, recorded as fact by TVP, and sent to a foreign country as given as fact, when I ask for them, I don't know what you're on about, Ben. We've made every available effort to look for them. There's no such material exists. At one point I say, can I have a copy of the material about me? Sierra's specific request at that point was, why, what do you want it for? Right, which notwithstanding her specific data role at that point, you yourself, Gillian, I know you're not like a data person specifically, I can guarantee that whatever PowerPoint minimally required data protection training you've had, that you will have been told that in the event of a data request, it's not just not considered good form to say, why, what do you want the information for? You're not even allowed to ask that, right? And so I then say, well, I need it for this purposes or whatever, but can I just have it? Then I get told, well, you'll have to be more specific. And then I'm like, well, other than a speeding ticket on the M40 about 10 years ago, I wasn't even aware that I had such voluminous involvement with Thames Valley Police that I needed to be specific. I've got friends who used to work for TVP that said to me, good God, it would be more effort to be specific. You just type your name in on the thing and press print. And then I say, okay, fine. So I send her this specific set of questions. Okay, can you tell me this? Can you tell me this? Can you tell me 90% of it? Oh, that's confidential. That's confidential. That's confidential. Right. So at this point now, I'm still, even then when I'm having conversations with TVP and I'm chasing this forward, and at this point then, even then in 2017, nobody's saying to me, Mr. Rich, just to let you know, an allegation of this was made against you, an allegation, because it's that classic police bullshit, and this isn't unique to TVP, but Lord knows you're good for it, where you crime something, you get the Brucey bonus points for crime in it, but if you don't tell the person about it, they're not going to argue it, they're not going to contest you, they're not going to complain. You get to class it as a crime, you get to class it as a resolve, goes in the outbox, everybody gets points and prizes, KPIs get met, keeps going, right? And whatever other specific spreadsheets need to be filled in to prove or evidence other response biases get served by that. And as it works great as long as the person involved doesn't get told about it. So there's untrue. I had hundreds, if you count them, of involvements, phone calls, messages, emails with Thames Valley Police asking and at no point did anybody ever specifically say, Mr. Rich, you are aware that this is on file against you, right? Okay, right. There's a thing called the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, right? Okay, there's a whole lot of other legislation which covers this, but the point at which I had initial involvement with these people, none of that. This was hidden from me. I only found out about this when, because of confusion with this and somebody else getting the wrong end of the stick who got upset by this, other involvement of a police force was involved, and in the internal, when I did a data request to them, because they weren't quite as on board with what lies TVP tells, they accidentally spilled more to me on that point than TVP have done. So I found out more about TVP's shit on record from a data request to another police force than I did to yourselves, incidentally, which was all stored in the yellow folder. What got stolen out of my van. Very interesting. Yeah, more on that another time. Right, so do you get how this goes? So you've lied about this non-stop, and I chase this up, and they cover for Sierra, Nick, James, all of you, they just covered, and it's not...
So Ben, unless you're going to let me speak...
What are you going to do about it?
You need to let me respond to
what are you going to do about this? What are you going to do about this?
I can't do anything about it. I've got no power under.
What should I do about it? Okay, I'm asking you.
That's what I'm trying to tell you, Ben.
And don't just say right to the bloody thingy council, because that's.
I'm not. Your other option option is to take it to judicial review and have a member of the judiciary review the whole thing. The way the complaints process works is we deal with the complaint, then it gets reviewed in-house. If a complainant is then unhappy, then they seek legal advice and take it to a judicial review.
Do you not recognise the fact that TVP are listed, I think at point of article, they were the second worst in the country for the ratio of complaints submitted to anything actually being done against an officer or member of staff? Like you get... Do you get?
I haven't looked at the data on that, so
you're like nationally renowned, if not internationally renowned, for being cover-up merchants on this. Not every member of the public has got the financial wherewithal, as well you lot know, to take things to judicial review. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I am a straight, white, English-speaking male who's accused falsely of domestic violence. There is no points, prizes or funds to help me out. I'm the baddie. In the epoch of our times, I'm the fucking Antichrist. Do you know what I mean? I'm some evil, domestically violently manipulative evil thing. I used to fucking work with domestically violent abused people. That was my job.
Swearing at me.
I'm not swearing at you. I'm swearing about this. I'm not swearing at you.
Yeah,
I'm not swearing at you, Gillian.
Don't use that language.
Okay, Gillian, I am not possessed of the finance, and TVP know this because this is their tactic. They'll fight this because sooner or later people just run out of means. Like they've run out of means. Like you've got how many people, every lie I've ever been told by TVP. Every lie I've ever been told, every nonsense that's ever come out of anyone's mouth, whether it's on the phone with Westwood laughing about losing paperwork, whether it's Sierra Reid lying about, oh, Ben, there's no such information, when she's literally sent, and it wasn't even, like, this is why Sierra Reid gets mentioned. If Sierra Reid had not been the person to send all that documentation, false as it was, to my ex.
You cannot change the past.
Yeah, but this is the point.
It's not in my gift.
Okay, but I'm asking. But this is. But you speak. You have the ear of Matt Barber, and Barber is doing nothing about this. Matthew, he sits there pontificating. Oh, I've just had a really successful coffee morning talking to this shoplifting awareness. This is a member of the public who has been through and is going through hell because of lies and bullshit done by the police force he's paid a not small amount of money to oversee and hold to account, right? And the default setting on this is he was the assistant to his predecessor, a man who was dragged before panel for doing dodgy off the books stuff himself, right? Yeah, and that he's just inherited the position from him. Oxford's going to vote blue on this. In he comes.
He was voted in.
Oxford's going to vote blue on this, I said. Right, okay, that's what I said. So he's the heir apparent in that regard. He's a more electable candidate because he can say, well, I've kind of done the job as an assistant already, which obviously he's not an incumbent in the strict sense, but he kind of has been. And given the politics of the area, he was a dead cert. Okay, right. So I haven't said he in that sense, but de facto it's a gift, right? Okay, so he just and there was onus on this guy to do something about this, and he just is choosing to not look. And the other one, Gillian, is this. Imagine you were at home, and let's say you didn't work for the police, right? And let's say you or your, I don't know if you have family, let's say your daughter, if you do have family, you've got a daughter, I don't know, right? Let's say, you don't need to answer whether you do, right? Let's say whether something horrible is happening to your daughter or your partner or you or whatever, even your dog, right? Whatever, right? And you phone the police and you say, can you help me? I'm making you aware of this situation. Now, it is not incumbent upon you on a bloody 999 call to be like, right, subsection so-and-so of the so-and-so Act, and it's incumbent, like the burden of legality and precision about all that stuff does not lie with the person saying, hang on, there's a bloke in my house with a baseball bat. You just make the police aware of this situation, and they take the initiative, or they used to investigate it. They are the professionals in that arrangement. And what the complaints process deliberately does is it inverts that. So you write stuff, and look, it should be enough that I say to several tiers of Thames Valley Police's rank and file, right, one of your own officers has alleged corruption here. One of your own officers, and you don't do it.
And I am going to end the phone call in a moment, but surely if you're saying to me somebody can't just make an accusation about you without evidence, then surely that same thing applies.
Yes, and I've given evidence. I've given evidence. Gillian, I'll answer you on that exact point. I've given evidence, and when I give evidence, when you know it's evidence, and you there in the collective sense, I don't mean you singular, I mean TVP. When you receive my evidence, you think, hey up, and things get lost. We can't progress this because you didn't write to us has been used three times, Gillian. So I take your point. You're quite right. I agree. Yes, there should be evidence, but you lot deliberate evidence only means something if there's a process to which if the evidence gets deleted, if it gets deleted, or the evidence gets evidence only means something if there's a panel that can go to. If you're not allowed to, but Gillian, I'll say this and then I'll go. I am an individual who supposedly, back in the day, or in some enduring sense, I'm sure they've typed a few things in since, supposedly I have done something of such criminal magnitude that it's considered acceptable for Thames Valley Police to write all sorts of horrible stuff about me, to share that quote-unquote information with other police forces, and to send that information abroad to service false allegations there, right? I am supposedly an individual who is so dangerous and violent that it necessitated a police fucking riot van, sorry swearing, a police van to extradite 15 people from a restaurant because I posed such a threat, despite the fact I was, quarter of a mile down the road sobbing on my cousin's shoulder, right? Now, on the one hand, I'm supposedly so terrible that everybody has to not speak to me, but you can tell all these lies about me to other courts, other police, and yet nobody has ever so much as taken my statement. And when I say I'll drive down there, we'll do it on my dollar, I know the M40, I'll get down there, right? Whenever, several years of this, I've said, take my statement, let's have some due process. And consistently, you guys don't even take my statement. And I'm having to write these letters because at no point has anybody said, Ben, come down here and we'll talk about this and then we'll have some process, because you know damn well it was corrupt and there was stuff done off the books. And yes, the stuff through Now and Storm was dodgy, but also the stuff that came on with the dodgy phone calls and all that stuff. Right, okay. There's so much. Even my own ex, in conversations in Helsinki, admitted that this was dodgy. She apologised. She bloody won't tell it publicly to everybody, but in the privacy of a conversation between her and I in a shopping centre when we're having a coffee, right? She said, "Look, I'm sorry about what was done in Oxford." Right, okay. It's corrupt. This is there's no restorative effect. This is a woman who, on oath, had to admit there's never once been anything aggressive or unpleasant from me in the entire 6 years I know her, and yet TVP is still posting shit around the place that I'm some sort of abuser. And you say, "Oh, but Ben, what about libel and what about so-and-so?" But therein lies the rub, because the trick TVP used, right, is they hid this. So there's all these wonderful laws, wasting police time, perverting the course of justice, like libel and slander and all these things, right? And the point is, they don't work because if it's kept secret. So the lies told by the people that lied to TVP, which had it been dealt with initially, these people have ended up in court, right? But it wasn't, because it was kept hidden from me. Nobody said any of this has been, Ben, Mr. Rich, just to let you know, this allegation's been made against you, right? This was kept hidden. It was kept hidden. I had to find out from a different police force that I was considered a domestic violence threat by Thames Valley Police, right? And that, in hundreds of conversations with you guys, nobody's ever once admitted that. Do you not see why I'm furious, Gillian?
I can understand your perspective on things.
It's not perspective, Gillian, it's fact. You tell me one thing I've just said that's untrue.
I don't know, because I wasn't there, and I take your word for it, but then somebody else comes along and
Okay, Gillian, does Thames Valley Police... One thing, does Thames Valley Police have an anti-corruption unit, yes or no?
Yes.
Fine. What can they phone me tomorrow morning?
I can't. I don't know.
Who can? In 9 years, well, technically from 2017 then. So from then, so in 6 years of me alleging corruption in letters and over the phone, at no point as your supposed anti-corruption unit ever once even phoned me. We've got people investigating people. It used to be bad enough when people were investigating were clearing their mates. Now it's just so ancestral. People are clearing themselves. That Waskett is the legal advisor is just hilarious. It's poachers turned gamekeeper. It's corrupt. You're corrupt.
What I am going to do...
Invite me down, Gillian. Anything other than, Ben, I'm going to arrange a meeting that's physically in Oxfordshire with you and some people. Anything other than that.
I'm not committing to that.
I bet you won't.
I will email you, as per your request, to confirm a bit more detail around what happened in terms of the independent investigation. And then I will leave you to respond with your letter, whatever it is, to Mr. Barber.
Okay.
And you've got the option of the police and crime panel.
Okay.
You've got the option of judicial review. I appreciate what you say about the cost involved in that. And I'm not the maker of the law.
I appreciate that. Gillian, can I just say that there's a weird consistency to TVB here, which is the concept of evidence and burden of proof is elastic for you guys, right? It was certainly forgotten by people back in 2014. I will not take as proof anything in a letter which is somebody who has an involvement with it saying this happened. Show me screenshots, show me proof of emails, show me the metadata. You can. How can you not? Why not?
Because
why not?
Information is subject to another subject. I can't share that information with you under GDPR rules.
You're telling me...
I don't make the law.
Yeah, but Gillian, that's not the case, because I know who the individual involved is, because I'm the person who submitted the complaint. What am I going to find out here? That the subject was Waskett. I know I submitted the complaint. The other one, I would, I'm the... You're not giving me new information by that. I'm not going to find out that a complaint has been made against Waskett because it was me that made it.
I appreciate.
Do you understand that? It's like
information surrounding the investigation is protected.
But this, Gillian, I said in multiple letters, I have said, because again, it keeps coming back when I said, you tell me why Thames Valley Police can't give me all this information about all that earlier stuff. And the best I ever got was this anonymously. Sarah Harper didn't foresee a problem, which shows you how suspicious this is. But can I just say this? Included within those 27,000 words to Barber was stuff about, can you, because I've repeatedly said, can somebody from Thames Valley Police evidence to me, quoting the law, on what basis, legally and lawfully, was my request to have a list of correspondence from myself and Thames Valley Police that you guys have got, on what basis is that considered confidential or not shareable with me? And because you guys don't want to do that, because it proves you've been fiddling whether you receive the letters or not, you never answer that. And Barber was asked to have a look at that within that letter, and he hasn't. The other one is, yes, I asked to speak to Mr. Barber, and he's a coward that he won't speak to me. But furthermore, he was asked specifically and directly to respond with conduct or comment on a number of things within that letter, and he has chosen, as a quick off the top of my head, to ignore about 97% of that letter. Right? He is written to in an office that he is politically accountable to, that he's paid money to work within, and he's just simply chosen. It's not some rant on Facebook or some scrawled scribble. It's a very well researched, documented, laid out in a legal bundle style for him to look at, and he's just simply chosen, and that's the words, he's chosen to not do any of the stuff that he was asked to do. He was asked to comment on that stuff. If somebody writes a letter to me, right, in a legal capacity, I don't just go, oh, I don't like that, but I'm not going to do it. He's no better than, so even if he wants to say, oh, well, the law means I can't reinvestigate this and this, which I don't agree with, by the way, but we've had that conversation. There's nothing in the law that prevents him from fully dealing with that letter. He just simply doesn't mention it. This is perhaps the most used technique TVP has done in the last 9 years. When you get something written to you that's got you bang to rights, you just ignore it. It's like you're like some bad A-level student that goes, hang on, that question looks too difficult, I'll move on to the next one. Like, and do you know what I mean?
Thank you for your call.
I'm asking you specifically, I'd like you to, and I appreciate you have no power of command or imperative over Barber, but you've admitted yourself you're able to advise him. I am asking you to mention to Mr. Barber that I consider it corrupt and cowardly for him to not meet me, and I am specifically asking him to meet me, and I'm specifically asking him also to respond to the direct addressed to him points and questions that were within that letter, and if he finds it confusing or voluminous as to what they were and where they are, I am volunteering at my expense to come down there with a highlighter and show him. And because as it stands, this how many £1,000 a year individual is just simply avoiding that because it's tricky, and as a member of the public I'm asking him to do that. And yes, he's in an elected office, and yes, Oxford votes blue, and yes, he's the incumbent, but he is in an elected office, and there is nothing wrong with me pasting this all over the Oxford Mail and anywhere else should I choose fit. As it stands, if there's an article in the Oxford Mail next week that says the crime commissioner was asked to look at this and saw no problem with one of his own staff who had a business with somebody else doing this, and Barber himself thought this was cushy, do you know what I mean? If I just start disseminating this bloody 9 years, where I now live in Shropshire is not that far away. I am asking to come down there. I've asked for 9 years. I'm not some rogue lunatic. I'll put on a tie, I'll come down. Stop hiding. To anybody you need to say this, stop hiding, stop lying. I will come down and be man about this, be adult about this, and speak to my face rather than scribbling deceptions and cowardice in dark rooms I never get to access to my face. And Gillian, I'm not aiming this at you. I have no involvement, but these are cowards, and they are pathetic cowards.
I just want to clarify one thing with you before we go. You said to me earlier in the conversation that you wanted me to send you an email with bullet points of what I told you.
Not about everything, Gillian. Not about everything. I'm not going to burden you with that.
No.
Don't worry about that.
About the investigation. When I tried to say that I was going to do that for you a few minutes ago, you basically said you didn't want it unless it had screenshots.
No. I'm inviting you. No. You've got to stop misquoting me. I am inviting you. I'm reminding you that if I'm asking for something resembling evidence, if you recall that phrase I used a long time ago now, show don't tell. So I am asking for something resembling evidence, and if you are well aware of what I'm asking for, okay?
Well, so all I can provide you is the bullet point list that you asked for earlier of the things that I have told you this evening, and I will do that in the morning.
Okay, and I will respond to that by saying I am specifically asking for the material which would prove the version of events as very, very momentarily, minutely Barbara's alleged, and in more detail and length that you've alleged. And my position is prove it, and anything
you would have to put in
and I would
a freedom of information or a data protection.
Thames Valley Police, just the last time I did one of those, you just sent me some silly 90-degree overinflated stuff. Well, you're just silly what you guys do.
Release stuff to you. Legally, I cannot release that stuff to you.
Okay, Gillian, do you have a dog in the background? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a dog lying underneath me.
Right, good on you. Right, fair enough. Right, how many legs has your dog got?
4.
Right, brilliant. Gillian, your dog's got 3 legs. How many legs has your dog got, Gillian?
4.
Yeah, me saying it does not alter it. Yeah, me saying it does not alter it. You guys suffer from the delusion that just saying, how was this good? This was fair.
I take that, Ben. I take that, and I know you don't intend it in this way, but I take that as you calling me a liar. Because in good faith...
No, I'm on about Barber here. No, don't take like that. I'm on about Barber.
But I am saying to you, I will provide you with the detail, as far as I can, around the fact that we had the allegation against Miss Waskett and Miss Reed independently investigated. And you're telling me that's good enough, not good enough. I need to show you all the evidence.
Can I ask one more thing before I go?
I cannot release that evidence.
One more thing before I go. Why, given the enormity of complaints and concerns I've raised and the enormity of action points that were in that for Mr. Barber, why is only, as far as what you're telling me, why is only the specific issue of Waskett the only bit to which, whether he has or he hasn't, we'll see, but why is the Waskett gate, why is Waskett gate the only bit that is...
Because he doesn't have the legal power to reinvestigate anything else.
I bet you he does if that gets looked into.
No, he doesn't.
Okay, What is he paid for? Gillian, what is he paid money for?
The next legal recourse that you have is judicial review.
Okay, and I am saying to TVP, let's all save each other a lot of money. I am asking now, because this will come up in court. I am, after 9 years of going on about this, and you're not the first person I've asked this to, and I appreciate that you personally within your role can't make a command decision on this, so obviously I'm asking you to communicate this to those that can. I am specifically asking once again, for probably the 57th time, to come down to TVP and speak to people about all this, and the record will show... When this does go to court, if I have to bloody sell everything I own to do it, it will show that TVP, in 9 years of this, despite repeated requests, deliberately hid from and evaded communication, cooperation and accountability with this. The record, it makes you look like the guilty party, because you've got one party saying, right, I'm asking for access to this, I'm asking for people to share this, and I want to come down and I even want to give a statement. Jesus, if you don't even open your mouth, just invite me in, I'll give the statement regarding everything, right? Even if it's just specific to the events of September 2014, just at least put my statement on file, right? You don't even do that. And the TVP has hid from this, and it's hidden from this because it's well aware that most people run out of steam on this stuff, and also it's well aware that the law holding the police in this country to account is pathetic, and as a result we get all sorts of horrific things happening, and every time it happens you have some individual who has complained about to the police on N occasions previously, and their PSD's covered it all up, and then sooner or later they do something so bloody terrible that you can't cover it up. And that's the situation in this country with the police, and people are getting wise to that. And I'm not, as I said to you before, I'm not innately against the police. My own family were in the police, and I'm saying to you, not just because I don't have the money unless I absolutely have to take this to court, but because I'm saying to you, sort this out yourself. There are people out there who would happily set fire to police cars. Lord knows how many of them are running around London right now. I am not one of those people. I'm not some Raoul Moat character that's going to shoot a copper in the face. I'm not that guy. I'm saying I have a better expectation of how the police should behave than you do, because I think you should be as police bloody should be and used to be, and you lot think it's acceptable to just tell no end of accountability evading fibs. I will give Matthew
that feedback tomorrow.
Be a man, tell him to stop being a coward. I personally call him out. I'm not going to put boxing gloves on and knock him in the... I'm certainly not going to get in a fight with him. If he kicked me with those feet, he'd kill me. Do you know what I mean? Look at the size of him. But but honestly, there's a circus with a clown missing somewhere. But tell him that I am personally saying to him, if he's got any honour or any conduct or any accountability as a gentleman, as whatever he holds dear, then on those issues, as a Christian, he likes to piously put stuff out. Yeah, as a Christian, I'm saying to him then, speak to me. speak to me. I come in peace. I'm opening my hands. I'm not turning up with aggression. Speak to me. And if he's ridiculously a fear that I'm going to like attack him, he can do it with 10 bloody coppers in the room and me behind plexiglass. It's if the physical management of that situation is foolishly the issue, then that's more than within TVP's powers to manage that. So I'm on okay, thanks for taking my call, Gillian, but ask him that, because he's a coward and a liar if he doesn't do it. Okay.
Bye-bye.